The conference room felt like a freezer that Friday morning. I sat across from Kevin, my manager, watching his fake smile spread across his face like oil on water. He'd called this meeting with no warning, no agenda, just, "Jessica, can you come in for a quick chat?" "We're restructuring the sales department," he said, sliding a manila folder toward me. "Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately." My heart dropped into my stomach. 11 months. 11 brutal months I'd spent chasing the biggest client our company had ever seen. The commission was supposed to be $56,000, my biggest payday ever. "What about the Lane Industries deal?" I asked, my voice barely steady. Kevin leaned back in his chair, that smirk growing wider. "The company will handle that transition internally. Don't worry about it." I stared at him, speechless. He was stealing my commission right out from under me. As I packed my desk an hour later, hands shaking with rage, Kevin walked by and chuckled. "Don't worry, Jessica," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The client will be just fine without you." If only he knew what he'd just started. 11 months earlier, I'd been desperate. My last 3 deals had fallen through, and Kevin was breathing down my neck about my numbers. That's when Lane Industries appeared on our prospect list, a massive manufacturing company looking to overhaul their entire logistics system. "This one's impossible," Kevin had warned me. "They've turned down every vendor in the city. But if you want to waste your time..." I spent weeks researching their business, studying their pain points, crafting the perfect approach. The first meeting was brutal. Lori Lane, their CEO, barely looked up from her laptop. "We only work with people we trust completely," she said coldly. "Trust has to be earned over months, not minutes." I flew to their headquarters in Chicago 3 times. I worked weekends building custom proposals. I learned every detail about their supply chain, their goals, their concerns. Slowly, painfully, I earned their respect. By month 6, Lori was taking my calls personally. By month 9, we were designing the implementation plan together. By month 10, they were ready to sign. But I remembered something Lori had said early on. "We hate being locked into rigid vendor relationships. Flexibility matters to us." That's when I added the clause. Sitting in my apartment that Friday night, still numb from the firing, I pulled out my copy of the Lane contract. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, searching for the section I'd drafted so carefully. There it was, buried in subsection 4.3. Should Lane Industries choose to retain Jessica Lane as their designated representative, contract exclusivity provisions are waived, and Lane Industries is permitted to continue engagement with Miss Lane or any entity of her choosing. I'd written it at Lori's request. She'd been concerned about account turnover, worried about losing continuity if I ever left the company. It seemed like a reasonable accommodation at the time, something to ease her concerns and close the deal. Kevin had signed off on the entire contract without reading it carefully. He'd been too excited about the revenue to scrutinize the details. Now that clause might be my lifeline. I stared at my phone for 10 minutes before I finally worked up the courage to dial Lori's number. My finger hovered over the call button. What if she didn't answer? What if she'd already been told I was gone? I pressed call. It rang once, twice. "Jessica," Lori's voice came through clear and concerned. "What's going on?" "They fired me," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "This morning. No warning, no explanation. They just said they were restructuring." The silence on the other end stretched for what felt like forever. "Nobody told us anything," Lori finally said, and I could hear the anger building in her voice. "We're supposed to start implementation next week. You're our point person for everything." I took a deep breath. "Lori, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you trust me personally, or do you trust the company?" "You," she said without hesitation. "We've been working together for almost a year. The company? I barely know anyone else there." My heart started racing. "There's something in our contract I need to tell you about. A clause I added at your request. It might give us options." I explained the exclusivity waiver, reading the exact language over the phone. Lori listened in silence. "So you could handle our account independently?" she asked. "Potentially, yes, but I'd need to..." "Hold on," she interrupted. "I'm getting our legal team on this right now. Don't go anywhere, Jessica. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. We're going to figure this out." The line went dead, and I sat there staring at my phone. Had I just saved my career, or destroyed it completely? Monday morning, Kevin's assistant knocked on his office door with an envelope marked Urgent, Legal Department. I heard about it later from my friend Sue, who still worked there. According to Sue, Kevin's face went completely white as he read the letter. Lane's legal team was demanding clarification about my termination and its impact on their contract. They wanted to know why their designated representative had been removed without consultation. Kevin immediately called Lane's offices, but Lori refused to take his call. Her assistant said, "Miss Lane will only discuss representation matters once the contractual issues are resolved." That's when Kevin apparently grabbed the contract file and started reading through every page, looking for loopholes or explanations. Sue said she could hear him cursing from down the hallway. By noon, he'd figured out what I'd done. The clause was right there in black and white, and there was no way around it. Kevin called an emergency meeting with the company's lawyers. But the damage was already done. Lane had the right to choose their representative, and they'd made their choice clear. Sue texted me that afternoon. "He's plotting something. Be careful." I saved her message and started documenting everything. I had a feeling I was going to need proof of whatever came next. That evening, I called my friend Charlie from law school. He'd become a contract attorney, and I desperately needed advice. "Read me the clause again," he said after I'd explained the situation. I read him the exact language, word for word. Charlie whistled low. "Jessica, this is bulletproof. If Lane chooses to work with you independently, your old company has zero legal standing to stop it. You basically wrote yourself a golden parachute. But can I actually do this? Start my own consultancy? Why not? You've got the expertise, you've got the client relationship, and you've got an airtight contract clause. The question is, are you ready to be your own boss?" My mind was spinning. I'd never considered running my own business. It seemed terrifying and exciting at the same time. "I could help you set up an LLC," Charlie offered. "Get you incorporated fast. If Lane wants to work with you, you'll need to be a legitimate business entity." I spent the rest of the night researching business licenses, insurance requirements, and tax implications. By dawn, I'd made my decision. If Lane wanted to work with me, I was going to be ready. Let's do it. I told Charlie when I called him back. "Welcome to entrepreneurship," he laughed. By Tuesday, Kevin's desperation was becoming obvious. Sue started feeding me information about his increasingly frantic behavior around the office. He'd been calling mutual contacts in the industry, spreading rumors about my instability and difficult personality. He told people I was emotionally manipulative and probably feeding the client false information about the company. It was character assassination, plain and simple. But Kevin had made a crucial mistake. Some of those contacts were people I'd worked with for years. They knew me, trusted me, and found Kevin's sudden campaign suspicious. One of them, David from another firm, called me directly. "Jessica, I just got a weird call from your old boss," he said. "He was basically trying to trash your reputation. It felt really off. Is everything okay?" I explained the situation without going into too much detail. David was appalled. "That's incredibly unprofessional," he said. "For what it's worth, everyone I know respects your work. Don't let him get in your head." But Kevin's whisper campaign was concerning. If he was willing to damage my professional reputation to protect himself, there was no telling how far he might go. That's when Lori called with news that changed everything. "We want to meet with you," she said. "Tomorrow. Just you." The Lane Industries headquarters building looked even more imposing when I was walking in as an independent consultant rather than a company employee. Lori met me in the lobby personally, which she'd never done before. "Let's go up to the executive conference room," she said. "The whole team wants to hear from you." My palms were sweating as we walked into the room. 6 executives sat around a massive oak table, including Lori, their CFO, and their head of operations. "Jessica," Lori began, "we're angry about how this situation was handled. Nobody consulted us before terminating our working relationship with you. That's not how partnerships work." I nodded, trying to stay professional despite my nerves. "We've reviewed the contract clause with our legal team," the CFO added. "It's valid and enforceable. So here's our question. Are you prepared to represent us independently? My mouth felt dry. I am. I've already started setting up a consultancy. I know this project inside and out, and I'm committed to seeing it through. Lori smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. Then let's talk terms. They wanted me. Really wanted me. I shook hands with each executive as we wrapped up the meeting. Walking out of that building, I felt like I was floating. Lane's legal department moved fast. By Thursday, Kevin received formal notice that Lane was terminating their contract with my old company and would be engaging with my new consultancy directly. Sue said Kevin's reaction was nuclear. He started screaming about breach of contract and threatened to sue both Lane and me personally. The company's senior partners had to calm him down and explain that they had no legal grounds for any lawsuit. But Kevin wasn't giving up. His next move was to try to delay Lane's contract termination through administrative stalling tactics. He claimed they needed more time to ensure proper transition of sensitive materials. It was a desperate play for time, hoping to find some way to invalidate the clause or force Lane to stay with the company. Lane's response was swift and decisive. Their legal team fired back with a letter demanding immediate transition within 48 hours. Citing the contract's explicit terms about representation choice. That Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a photo of a cease and desist letter addressed to me. Kevin was claiming I had stolen proprietary information and was violating non-compete agreements. My hands shook as I read the demands. Stop all contact with Lane immediately, return all stolen materials, and abandon my consultancy plans. It was pure intimidation. But it was also exactly what I'd been expecting. I forwarded the cease and desist letter to Charlie immediately. His response came back within an hour, and it was everything I'd hoped for. "This is garbage," he wrote. "Pure intimidation with zero legal basis. Send them this." His response letter was a masterpiece of legal precision. He calmly explained that I had violated no agreements, stolen no materials, and was operating within the explicit terms of the contract that Kevin himself had signed. The key paragraph made me smile. "Our client is not breaking any agreements. She is following the contract your client executed. If you have concerns about the terms you agreed to, that reflects poor contract review on your part, not misconduct on ours." Charlie attached copies of the contract clause, Lane's written confirmation of their intent to work with me, and documentation showing I had developed all client relationships through proper channels. I sent the response that same day. The silence from Kevin's side was deafening. No angry phone calls, no follow-up threats, no legal action. Charlie was right, he'd been cornered, and he knew it. But I should have known Kevin wouldn't go down quietly. The real revelation was still coming. The following week, Sue texted me something that made my blood run cold. "Emergency board meeting today. Kevin's in hot water." Apparently, the board had started asking hard questions about my termination. The timing looked suspicious. Firing the lead salesperson right before a massive commission payout raised obvious red flags. Kevin had tried to justify it as budget preservation and strategic restructuring, but he couldn't explain why he'd let the Lane deal progress so far if he'd always planned to eliminate my position. The board members weren't idiots. They could see through his flimsy explanations. But Sue had more news. Someone from HR reached out to me anonymously. They said this isn't the first time Kevin's done something like this. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" Apparently, there was another woman who got fired right before a big bonus payout last year. HR had concerns then too, but nothing came of it. I felt sick. Kevin had a pattern of axing people right before major payouts, and the company had covered it up. But this time might be different. Sue said several board members were demanding a full investigation into Kevin's personnel decisions. That evening, I got a message from an unknown email address. "Can we talk? I have information you need to hear." The woman who contacted me was named Lisa Stewart. She'd worked for the company 2 years ago in business development. We met at a quiet coffee shop downtown, and her story was painfully familiar. "I'd landed a huge client," she explained. 6 months of work, supposed to be a $20,000 bonus. Then suddenly, 2 weeks before the deal closed, Kevin found reasons to fire me. "Budget cuts," he said, "performance concerns." Lisa's hands shook slightly as she talked. I fought it, but I didn't have the resources for a legal battle. I just had to walk away and let them keep everything I'd built. Did anyone else know what was happening? I asked. HR knew. At least one board member knew, but Kevin convinced them it was a legitimate business decision. Lisa pulled out her phone and showed me screenshots she'd saved. Email threads, performance reviews, documentation of her client relationships, everything painted the picture of a dedicated employee who'd been sacrificed for profit. I've been following your situation, she said. When I heard what happened to you, I knew I had to speak up. This time, we have proof it's a pattern. I felt a surge of both anger and hope. Lisa was willing to go on record about Kevin's behavior. Are you sure? I asked. This could get messy. Lisa's jaw set with determination. He can't keep doing this to people. The leaked email thread appeared in the board's inboxes on a Wednesday morning. Sue told me later that it caused an immediate firestorm. The emails were Kevin's own words, sent to his assistant and the HR director 3 weeks before my termination. They showed him actively planning to fire me specifically because of the high payout risk from the Lane Commission. One email was particularly damning. We need to move fast on the Jessica situation. If Lane signs next month, we're looking at a $56K commission hit. Better to restructure now and handle the client transition internally. Another email discussed timing the termination to minimize legal exposure and ensuring the deal progression continues without disruption. It was clear, documented proof that my firing had nothing to do with restructuring or performance. It was purely about stealing my commission. The board called an emergency meeting for Friday. Kevin was apparently panicking, trying to claim the emails were taken out of context or that he'd been misunderstood. But the evidence was overwhelming. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was the company's head of legal. Jessica, she said carefully, we'd like to discuss a settlement that might resolve this situation amicably. I almost laughed. Now they wanted to make a deal. I'm listening, I said. The settlement offer was exactly what I'd expected, $56,000 to make everything go away quietly. They'd pay my commission, I'd sign a non-disclosure agreement, and we'd all pretend none of this had ever happened. That's generous, I said to their lawyer, but I'm afraid that deal is no longer available. There was a long pause on the other end. What do you mean? She asked. I mean the Lane deal belongs to me now. They've chosen to work with my consultancy. The $56,000 was based on the original company contract. The new deal is worth considerably more. It was true. Working directly with Lane, without the company's markup and overhead, I was looking at a much larger payday. Plus, I owned the ongoing relationship. We'd like to negotiate, she started. There's nothing to negotiate, I interrupted politely. Lane Industries has made their choice. They want to work with me directly. That same afternoon, Lori called with the final confirmation I'd been waiting for. We've completed our legal review, she said. We're ready to sign with your consultancy. Are you ready to move forward? I looked around my small apartment, thinking about how much my life was about to change. Absolutely, I said. Let's do this. The next 2 weeks were a blur of business setup activities. Charlie helped me file all the paperwork for my LLC. I opened business bank accounts, got professional insurance, and designed a simple but professional logo. Lane wanted to announce our partnership at their upcoming leadership summit, which meant I'd be speaking publicly about the transition. The thought terrified and excited me in equal measure. Sue kept me updated on the chaos at my old company. Kevin was desperately trying to save his job, claiming he'd been following company policy and that my departure was purely coincidental timing. But too many people knew the truth now. Lisa's testimony, the leaked emails, and the pattern of behavior were impossible to ignore. My former colleagues were quietly cheering me on. Several had reached out privately to congratulate me on landing the Lane deal independently. A few even asked if I'd be hiring soon. The night before the Lane summit, I practiced my presentation in front of my bathroom mirror. I was going to be speaking to 200 business leaders about ethical partnerships and client relationship management. A year ago, I never could have imagined standing on that stage, but Kevin's greed had pushed me into something I never would have attempted on my own. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing. Kevin's final desperate move came the morning of the Lane summit. He somehow got the personal phone number of Lane's head of operations and called him directly. "You're making a huge mistake," Kevin apparently said. "Jessica is emotionally unstable. She's been manipulating your team with false information about our company. You're risking a public relations nightmare." What Kevin didn't know was that Lane had started recording all calls related to vendor relationships after a previous legal dispute. They had his entire rant on tape. The operations head called Lori immediately. "You need to hear this," he said, and played back Kevin's desperate attack on my character. Lori was furious. She called me an hour before my presentation. "Jessica, we just received a very interesting phone call from your former boss," she said, her voice tight with anger. "I'm forwarding you the transcript. This man is absolutely desperate." Reading Kevin's words made me feel sick and vindicated at the same time. He'd completely destroyed any remaining credibility with Lane. "This settles it," Lori continued. "We're done with that company permanently, and we're going to make sure everyone at the summit understands exactly why we chose to work with you instead." Walking onto that stage an hour later, I felt a calm confidence I'd never experienced before. Kevin had just handed me the perfect introduction to my new career. The summit presentation went better than I could have dreamed. I spoke about building genuine client relationships, the importance of trust in business partnerships, and how ethical behavior creates long-term value. When I finished, the audience gave me a standing ovation. Afterward, Lori announced that Lane Industries was proud to be working with my consultancy on their logistics transformation. She specifically mentioned the integrity and professionalism that had convinced them to make the switch. Over the next 3 days, my phone didn't stop ringing. Other companies at the summit wanted to discuss potential partnerships. A procurement manager from a Fortune 500 company asked for my business card. By the end of the week, I'd signed my second client. The Lane deal had been worth $56,000 in commission. Working directly with them, plus the implementation bonuses, brought it to $180,000 over 18 months. I was in shock. Less than a month ago, I'd been fired and desperate. Now I was running a growing consultancy with multiple clients. That Friday evening, I celebrated alone in my apartment with takeout Chinese food and a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. It felt surreal, but it also felt right. A recruiter called the next Monday with an interesting proposition. The recruiter represented a major logistics firm looking for a senior director. The position paid 6 figures and came with significant autonomy. 6 months ago, I would have jumped at the opportunity. "I appreciate the offer," I told her. "But I'm building something of my own now." She seemed surprised. "Are you sure? This is a significant step up from where you were." I looked around my small home office, thinking about everything that had led me here. Kevin's betrayal, the contract clause, the leap into entrepreneurship. "I'm positive," I said. "I don't want to work for someone else anymore." The truth was, I'd learned something important about myself over the past month. I was capable of more than I'd ever imagined. Working for Kevin had made me cautious, always worried about politics and approval. Running my own business, I felt free to be strategic, creative, and bold. The recruiter wished me luck and asked me to call if I ever changed my mind. But I knew I wouldn't. For the first time in my career, I was exactly where I wanted to be, and I was just getting started. News of my success spread quickly through the industry. The story of Kevin losing a major client due to firing the lead salesperson became a cautionary tale in business circles. People started talking about the importance of reading contracts carefully and treating employees ethically. A few industry blogs picked up the story, though they kept names anonymous. One article titled, "How Greed Cost a Company Their Biggest Deal," went viral in logistics circles. Everyone knew exactly what company and situation it was referring to. Kevin's reputation was in ruins. Sue told me he'd become a pariah in the office, with even senior executives avoiding association with him. But the real validation came when I received a speaking request from a professional development conference. They wanted me to talk about building ethical partnerships after corporate betrayal. The irony wasn't lost on me. Kevin's attempt to steal my commission had turned me into a recognized expert on business ethics. I accepted the speaking engagement. Standing on stages, talking about my experience, felt like the perfect way to ensure other employees wouldn't go through what I had. And it was excellent marketing for my growing consultancy. 3 months later, Sue sent me a screenshot that made me laugh out loud. Kevin had quietly applied for a VP position at Lane's biggest competitor. Someone had leaked his application to Lane's procurement team. Within hours, Lori had called the hiring company's CEO directly. "If you bring Kevin on board," she said politely, "we'll need to reconsider all future partnership opportunities with your firm." The message was clear. Hiring Kevin would cost them Lane's business. Kevin's interview was canceled that same day. Sue said he'd become increasingly desperate, applying for positions well below his previous level. But word had spread about the leaked emails and his vindictive behavior toward former employees. Nobody wanted to hire someone who'd created such a public relations disaster. That afternoon, I got a LinkedIn message that surprised me. It was from Kevin himself. Just one line: "You win." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling a mix of emotions. There was satisfaction, but also sadness. Kevin had brought this on himself. But watching someone's career self-destruct wasn't something to celebrate. I didn't respond to his message. Some conversations aren't worth having. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet Kevin for coffee 2 weeks later. He'd sent a follow-up message asking for just 15 minutes to explain everything. I was curious about what possible explanation he could offer. We met at a generic chain coffee shop near my old office. Kevin looked terrible, tired, defeated, older than his 45 years. "I was under tremendous pressure," he began before I'd even sat down. "The board was demanding cost cuts. I thought if I could just get through the quarter." I listened without interrupting as he tried to rewrite history. According to his version, firing me had been a difficult decision made for the good of the company. The commission savings were just a side benefit. "I never meant for it to get this ugly," he continued. "The legal threats, the rumors, I was just trying to protect myself." When he finished his rehearsed explanation, I leaned back in my chair. "Kevin," I said quietly, "you didn't lose because I fought dirty. You lost because I didn't." His face flushed red. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I played by the rules. I honored my contracts, treated people with respect, and let the truth speak for itself. You tried to steal my work and destroy my reputation. The difference is obvious." I stood up to leave, then turned back. "Good luck with your job search." 6 months after my termination, my consultancy was thriving. I'd moved into a proper office space and hired my first employee, Sue, who'd finally decided to leave the toxic environment at my old company. Lane's project had exceeded all expectations. Their new logistics system was saving them millions annually, and they'd become my biggest advocate in the industry. I'd also started a small mentorship program, helping other professionals who'd been pushed out by unethical management. It felt good to use my experience to help others navigate similar situations. One evening, I was reviewing proposals for new clients when I got an unexpected email. It was from another former client of my old company, a mid-sized manufacturer I'd worked with briefly 2 years ago. "Jessica," the email read, "we heard about your new consultancy through Lane Industries. We're not happy with our current vendor relationship. Would you be interested in discussing a potential partnership?" I smiled as I typed my response. I'd be delighted to discuss it. The next day, Sue told me she'd heard rumors about more clients jumping ship from our old company. "You're becoming their worst nightmare," she laughed. But it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about building something better. Over the next year, 3 more clients followed Lane's lead and switched to my consultancy. Word was spreading that I offered the same expertise as the larger firms, but with better personal service and more ethical business practices. My old company was hemorrhaging clients and struggling to explain why their former employee was suddenly their biggest competitor. Sue showed me the industry newsletter that finally announced Kevin's departure. Effective immediately, Kevin Walsh is leaving his position to pursue other opportunities. No farewell party, no glowing tribute, no mention of his 15 years with the company. Just a quiet exit and the erasure of his legacy. I felt a moment of sympathy for him, but it passed quickly. He'd made his choices, and I'd made mine. The same newsletter mentioned my consultancy's rapid growth and recent industry recognition. The contrast was striking. From fired employee to industry leader in 18 months, Sue observed. That's got to be some kind of record. I was proud of what we'd built, but I was prouder of how we'd built it. No shortcuts, no betrayals, no stolen credit, just honest work and ethical relationships. 2 years after Kevin fired me, I received a formal letter that made me shake my head in amazement. It was from my old company's board of directors, asking if I'd be interested in returning as a senior partner. They offered equity, autonomy, and a generous salary. They wanted to rebuild the company culture, and thought I'd be the perfect person to lead that effort. I read the letter twice, then walked to my office window. My consultancy now occupied the top floor of a downtown building, with a view of the city that stretched to the horizon. I had 12 employees, 36 active clients, and complete control over my professional destiny. Why would I give that up to work for the people who'd allowed Kevin to operate unchecked for years? I drafted my response carefully, but firmly. Thank you for your offer, but I don't work for companies that treat people as disposable assets. I wish you the best in finding leadership that shares your values. I sent the email, closed my laptop, and stepped onto my office balcony. The city stretched before me, full of opportunities and possibilities. This time, it was mine to explore on my own terms. Standing on that balcony, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. Kevin had fired me to save $56,000 in commission. He'd thought he was being clever, eliminating an expensive employee right before a big payout. Instead, he'd launched my career as an entrepreneur and lost his company, their biggest client. The Lane deal alone had earned me over $300,000. Add in the other clients who'd followed, plus the ongoing contracts and speaking engagements, and I'd made more money in 2 years than I would have in 10 years working for someone else. But the money wasn't the best part. The best part was the freedom to build something meaningful, to work with people I respected, and to sleep peacefully, knowing I'd earned everything through honest effort. Sue joined me on the balcony, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Any regrets? She asked. I thought about it seriously. The stress of starting a business, the uncertainty of those first few months, the legal battles and character attacks. None, I said finally. He thought he was ending my career. Instead, he gave me the push I needed to start my real career. Sue raised her coffee cup. To Kevin, she said with a grin. I laughed and clinked my cup against hers. He fired me to save $56,000, I said, looking out at the city below. I walked away with the whole damn thing.